Doc, I have some more larger, profound kind of questions that I'm seeking answers to. Now, I'm a clinical psychologist. I often work with people who've gone through some profound tragedies, trauma, uh, horrific violent sexual assaults, prolonged childhood abuse, neglect, uh, parental loss, and so forth. Some of the more deeper and painful events that could occur in this lifetime. And then the question for a lot of them, the ones that they struggle with, is what is the purpose for all of this? And when we dive into these areas of spirituality, including some of this post-material science, one of the larger questions is, why would anyone choose to go through something like this? And then there's the secondary aspect of healing around forgiveness. So those are two major, powerful points that I often find myself in the work that I do. So the first question is how intentional are some of these life challenges that we may have a say in incarnating, and maybe that our soul's choice to go through them, and why would that be? And then the second thing is, what advice may you give, and from some of these profound lessons that you've learned, not only through your own NDE, but also with your journey since then, about how someone may move past some of those events that have happened in their lives?
Well, I think to me, one thing that was quite clear from the overall experience, the NDE and kind of the aftermath and trying to make sense of it all, was that hardships in life, uh, many things that had not made sense to me before, often when you look back on them, they make more sense. You kind of realize that you learned something, you grew as a soul, and that kind of thing. And I think to me, it's become clear that even some of the greatest hardships, and where it's very difficult and challenging to figure out why a soul would ever, kind of select this, why a soul group would ever put one of their members through that piece of the interaction. And yet, what I've come to realize is there's that old saying, God never gives us more than we can handle. I don't know that I totally buy into that as it's stated, but what I will say is I've come to be far more open to the recognition that the challenges we face in life, the hardships, ultimately benefit us with the kind of growth and soul transformation that makes it all worthwhile. Now, I don't want to kind of trivialize the hardships that anybody's been through, because I know there's a lot of really tough stuff out there for each and all of us. But the other thing I'll remind you of is when you've been through a near death experience, you also realize that all that pain and suffering of physical discomfort, emotional um, issues, et cetera, in this world and in this body, as soon as we transition into that spiritual realm, that pain and suffering disappears. It dissipates tremendously rapidly. So it serves as a kind of a conditioner and as a something that flavors our interaction with events here. But you get very kind of complete relief of physical, emotional suffering um, in those realms, in that spiritual realm. So and of course, this is what some people even use, like children who are abused often learn to dissociate, and kind of separate their awareness from their kind of bodily awareness. And it's a defense mechanism. I know Joe Monagle, who is a very successful remote viewer in the military's program of remote viewing, actually said that he thinks the best remote viewers come from traumatic childhoods that involve dissociation, because they learn to do that. And dissociation is kind of a big concept here, especially when you realize that these modern scientific models of consciousness are one where each and every one of us is kind of a dissociated eddy current from that primordial mind. But from my perspective, and I think this is also true in looking back on your life, like so in the kind of general uh, rubric of life reviews, but just in reflecting on your life, I think a lot of people come to realize that those hardships and difficulties in many ways gave them a gift. And it's how they adapt to it, it's how they responded to it, how they kind of grow as a soul through that challenge that, to me, starts to make the case that, no challenge is too great to serve as a transformational tool for an evolving soul. And again, I'm not trying to trivialize the hardship that any person has ever lived through, because I realize there's been horrific trauma out in our world. And some of it comes from parents. You look at for example, those schools that a lot of the Native American children were sent to in Canada and some in the U.S., et cetera. And I mean, there were just horrific hardships that were perpetrated on these children. And you kind of wonder, how does all this happen in this world? How can there be a loving God associated with all that? And yet, I believe ultimately that we're meant to have the resilience and to have the ability to grow through these challenges and hardships.